Do you still hear the pounding war drums when Conan raises his sword? Behind the legend of Conan the Barbarian, 1982, were faces that once burned brightly across the deserts of Hyboria, only to fade quietly away in real life, through accidents, illness, and loneliness. Who slipped out of the frame before they could hear another round of applause? Let us rewind the film, uncover their true names, and honor the blazing legacies they left behind. James Earl Jones as Thulsa Doom. When James Earl Jones had just turned 51, he carved his name into film history as the main villain Thulsa Doom in Conan the Barbarian in 1982. With his commanding presence and thunderous voice, he transformed the character into an unforgettable symbol of evil, spreading fear with nothing more than a glance or a word. Few could have guessed that behind the spotlight was a lifetime filled with tragedy, endurance, and untold shadows. James Earl Jones was born on January 17, 1931, in Arcaboutla, Mississippi. From a very young age, he faced the pain of abandonment by his father and was raised by a strict grandmother. His childhood was not one of peace, but a long chain of loneliness and fear. In elementary school, he developed a severe stutter so debilitating that for years he could barely speak a word in class. Those silent years pushed him toward depression, leaving only paper and poetry as refuge for his soul. With determination, he overcame his insecurities to pursue art, but life continued to pile on challenges. His first marriage to Julienne Marie collapsed after just 4 years, leaving deep emotional wounds. Although he later found happiness with Cecilia Hart, and they had a son, Flynn, his final years were marked by the quiet burden of standing by his child through serious health issues. These personal upheavals only deepened the gravity of his presence on stage and screen, weighted with lived experience. On September 9, 2024, James Earl Jones took his final breath in Paulding, New York, at the age of 93, after many years battling complications from type 2 diabetes. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $40 million, largely from his legendary voice work as Darth Vader and Mufasa, alongside more than 200 iconic roles. Max von Sydow as King Osric. At 53 years old, Max von Sydow took on the role of King Osric in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, a weary yet wise monarch who set Conan on his quest to rescue his daughter and expose the dark face of power. His heavy steps opened a story not only of swords and blood, but also of the solitude of a powerful soul whose light was fading. Max von Sydow was born on April 10, 1929, in Lund, Sweden, and fate quickly tied him to the thorny test of marriage. His first union with Christina Olin lasted nearly 3 decades, but the distance created by stages, film sets, and long tours drained the warmth from their home. The man who stood tall at 6'3" on stage was lost in the kitchen before cold meals. When the door closed in 1979, it not only ended a marriage but also shut down the illusion that success could mend nameless voids. Life turned a new page when he took Catherine Breillat's hand, but the fear of repeating old mistakes always lingered after each round of applause. As a husband again, he learned to speak slower, to listen more carefully, and to leave silence for the one beside him, though the shadow of an artist's life still crept past the threshold. Each contract, each flight, each role was another test. To hold on to the hand in his grasp, or let go to make the call time. On March 8, 2020, Max von Sydow passed away in Provence at the age of 90, leaving behind an estimated net worth of $16 million, and a farewell image that pierced audiences' hearts. The knight seated before the chessboard on the beach in the Seventh Seal. Mako Iwamatsu as the Wizard. Mako Iwamatsu played the wizard in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, a thin and mysterious sorcerer who used narration like an incantation to open the door of destiny for Conan when he was 48 years old. Every line he spoke was like a blade cutting through the darkness, guiding audiences deeper into a world where the power of words could bend fate. Mako Iwamatsu was born on December 10th, 1933, in Kobe, Japan, and came to the United States after the war to reunite with his dissident parents. He carried with him an unpolished language and a jumble of nameless memories, served in the U.S. Army, and then knocked on the door of Pasadena Playhouse to study acting. The road to recognition, however, was paved with harsh realities, prejudice, and typecasting. Many times he was rejected right in front of the camera because of his Asian face. Many times he stood outside casting rooms only to hear the words, "This role is not for you." Mako did not retreat before that wall. He chose instead to confront it head-on. He co-founded East-West Players to reclaim dignity for Asian actors, then returned to auditions with defiant eyes and a voice sharpened by countless nights of pronunciation practice. He accepted small roles to pay the rent, but preserved on stage the right to speak as a full human being. Each role he won dropped another shard of prejudice to the floor. Each rejection hardened a new layer of determination in his chest. On July 21, 2006, Mako Iwamatsu passed away from esophageal cancer at the age of 72, leaving behind an estimated net worth of around $4 million. What made audiences ache was not the wizard's spells, but the steaming teapot and warm voice of Uncle Iroh he once brought to life for an entire generation. William Smith as Conan's father. At 49 years old, William Smith took the role of Conan's father in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, appearing briefly in the opening but etching himself deeply into memory with a powerful physique and a voice resonant like newly forged steel. His blacksmith character laid the foundation for Conan's tragedy and faith, as if a lifetime forged in fire remained only in the mute veins of destiny. William Smith was born on March 24, 1933, in Columbia, Missouri, carrying into his youth a fracture that never healed, years of military service and the weight of war pressing heavily on his chest. He returned as a soldier with sleepless nights and nameless nightmares, standing at a crossroads between knowledge and survival, pursuing a graduate degree while clinging to film sets so the emptiness after gunfire would not consume him. Each time he opened the door to an audition room, it was as if he was lifting the lid on a chest of memories, shutting it quickly before the explosions could rush out. Growing up in the windswept Midwest, William Smith tried to turn trembling into muscle and startle into discipline. He pushed his body to its limits with martial arts, boxing, and film work, channeling every unease into the cold glare of the villain on screen. Each fierce role helped him balance on the thin line of inner calm. Each fall before the camera was another time he rose in real life, learning to breathe deeply and let the noise of the past flow out of his lungs. On July 5, 2021, William Smith passed away in Woodland Hills at the age of 88 after a long battle with Alzheimer's. His net worth was estimated at around $5 million. What remains with audiences is not the strength that toppled enemies, but the moment the blacksmith raised the blazing sword and placed it in his son's hands. Ben Davidson as Rexor. At 42 years old, Ben Davidson stepped into the role of Rexor in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, the giant, axe-wielding bodyguard who knelt beside Thulsa Doom and struck terror with every swing of his arm. His presence was like a fortress wall, opening the film with a tragedy soaked in sweat and blood, where a body hard as steel still hid fractures no one could see. Ben Davidson was born on June 14, 1940, in Los Angeles, California, and from his earliest days on the football field, fate chose one element to twist his life: injury. Head collisions, knees grinding like metal on metal, sleepless nights from pain shooting up his spine, all piled into a low, constant noise inside the mind of the man who stood more than 2 meters tall. The athlete would walk out of the locker room with a half smile, yet his hands trembled slightly from the blows still echoing inside. Davidson carried that very element with him when he shifted into acting, pain that would not let go. He practiced martial arts to stay balanced, held his breath to push through fight scenes, and swallowed the moments when his knees buckled after the director called cut. Every brutal role he took was a way to turn pain into discipline. Every time he stood tall before the camera was another chance to outrun the shadow of injury chasing behind him. The giant on screen was never truly invulnerable. He simply hid the wounds under armor and kept walking forward. On July 2, 2012, Ben Davidson died in San Diego from prostate cancer at the age of 72, leaving behind an estimated net worth of around $2 million. Perhaps what audiences remember is not Rexor's axe swing, but the silver and black Raiders helmet hanging quietly from the handlebars of his RAGBRAI bicycle, swaying in the wind. Valerie Quenison as the princess. At 25 years old, Valerie Quenison played Princess Yasmina in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, a pivotal link in a rescue mission steeped in destiny. The fragility of the princess, set against the violence of the sword and sorcery world, revealed to audiences that beneath the fairy tale cloak was a deeply human trembling, and from there the story opened like a fine but lasting tear. Valerie Quenison was born on December 3, 1957, in Boulogne-Billancourt, France, and grew up in acting classes chosen not to shine, but to heal. The little girl who once dreamed of being a circus acrobat changed direction because of one shadow that clung to her: shyness and social anxiety. She entered the conservatoire with hands still shaking, practiced speaking lines without stumbling, practiced standing firm under heavy stares, and with each curtain call, she learned to breathe just a little calmer. Her path to film opened, but that same shadow kept tightening when the lights grew brighter. Valerie carried her anxiety like a silhouette trailing behind her. Distant film sets, cramped interviews, expectations that cut at her heart. She chose roles she could manage, stepped back from noise when her heartbeat raced, and saved her gentleness for her young family. Each time she appeared, she spoke less but acted with more depth, as if every word had to pass through a small storm inside her chest before reaching the camera. On March 19, 1989, Valerie Quenison died in a car accident at the age of 31. Her estimated net worth of around $1 million closed a brief life full of potential. What remained with audiences was not only Yasmina's crown, but the image of a fragile hand still trying to steady its breath against the wind of the highway. Franco Columbu as Pictish Scout. At 41 years old, Franco Columbu played the Pictish Scout in Conan the Barbarian, 1982. A fleeting shadow moving through the cold forest, brief on screen, yet thickening the atmosphere of danger that surrounded Conan. Just a few silent frames were enough to reveal his short but iron-built figure, muscles forged from years of struggle away from the spotlight. Franco Columbu was born on August 7, 1941, in Ololai, Sardinia, Italy, and grew up amid the rocky island winds and the grip of poverty, carrying with him one piercing theme of youth: the journey of leaving home to find survival. The young man left Sardinia for the continent with nothing but calloused hands and a few broken words of foreign language, doing whatever work he could to pay for lodging, sleeping on gym floors, and promising himself that his body would become the only passport of true value. He carried that same theme with him when he arrived in America: exhaustion from long shifts, waking in the night from homesickness, only to return to the gym before dawn to pull one more weight, push one more rep, and swallow every mocking word about his height. Every tear across his palms was a signature with fate. Every collapse beside the barbell was another lesson in standing back up, adjusting his breath, and counting the beats of a heart that refused to surrender. On August 30, 2019, Franco Columbu died from drowning off the coast of Sardinia at the age of 78, leaving behind an estimated net worth of about $10 million. The most haunting image is not of his Mr. Olympia medals, but of the deep blue sea cradling a body that had once defied everything. Arnold Schwarzenegger as Conan. Arnold Schwarzenegger took on the role of Conan in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, a warrior born of fire, steel, and vengeance when he was 35 years old. Every strike of Conan's sword opened not only a dark, brutal world of sword and sorcery, but also a door for Hollywood's newest face, a sculpted physique, a gaze like an oath, and a past unknown to the audience. Arnold Alois Schwarzenegger was born on July 30th, 1947, in Thal, Styria, Austria, and his childhood was haunted by one dominant element, the darkness of family life. He grew up under a strict hand and heavy beatings, lived in a house crowded with silence, and learned to swallow tears into muscle. As a teenager, he turned to iron weights to transform fear into discipline, to Kyokushin karate to turn trembling into strikes, and secretly vowed that the shadow in his home would never hold power over his life again. Arnold left Austria at 21, carrying that same element with him into a foreign land, the aftershocks of a violent childhood colliding with the loneliness of being an immigrant. The man with a difficult name and a strange accent stood in gyms as if standing in a battlefield, lifting weights and with them, his sense of dignity. The first dollars came slower than the calluses on his hands. The mocking laughs at his accent echoed longer than applause. Yet every morning before dawn, the young man pulled himself out of bed to train one more set, as if missing a rep meant the old darkness would win again. Today, Arnold Schwarzenegger is 78 years old and continues forward like a warrior who has traded the sword for gears. He produces films, still appears on screen, organizes the Arnold Sports Festival, advocates for the environment and public health, and preserves the discipline that once saved him as a child. Sandahl Bergman as Valeria. At 31 years old, Sandahl Bergman took on the role of Valeria in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, the warrior woman who charged into fire and steel at Conan's side. Every swing of her sword seemed to tear through the darkness, while Valeria's fierce gaze carved an oath of vengeance onto the silver screen, launching a legend steeped in both glory and the scent of blood and sweat. Sandahl Bergman was born on November 14, 1951, in Kansas City, Missouri, and her 20s began with late-night bus rides to New York in pursuit of a Broadway dream. That path chose a harsh element to test her, the physical toll of a dancer's life. She trained under blinding lights, swallowed the sting of aching knees, accepted understudy roles in Pippin, and rose stubbornly after each fall, as though slowing even half a beat would cause her dream to slip away. She carried that same element with her when she moved into film, bruises behind the scenes and a loneliness no one else could see. On the set of Conan, she had no stunt woman of her stature, so she threw herself into the dangerous scenes, gripping her sword tightly to secure every frame. She stood tall before the camera, but at night wrapped ice around swollen ankles, learned to smile through hands still trembling with pain, and reminded herself that sometimes victory simply meant breathing steadily through one more take. Today, Sandahl Bergman is 73 years old, having closed her acting career to live quietly and choose carefully when to meet fans. She maintains the discipline of a dancer-warrior, shares her training experience, and occasionally returns to events where Valeria's name is still called. What lingers is the image of a woman raising her sword before the flames, a reminder both gentle and fierce. Some roles only blaze when the actor dares to pay with their own body and endurance. Gerry Lopez as Subutai. At 34 years old, Gerry Lopez entered 1982 with the role of Subutai in Conan the Barbarian, the quiet yet deadly companion who loosed arrows like slashes across the night. His sparse words and calm gaze gave each chase scene the tautness of a drawn bowstring, creating the sense that behind that gentle smile lay a lifetime of battling unseen undercurrents. Gerry Lopez was born on November 7, 1948, in Honolulu, Hawaii, and his path to the sea was also his path into fear. As a teenager standing before Pipeline, his heart pounded wildly as he learned to hold his breath one beat longer to avoid being dragged into the whirlpool. One element clung to him from those days until his fame, accidents, and the obsession with survival. Each dive left his lungs burning like fire. Each gasp for air reminded him that glory on the surface was only a thin veneer over humanity's fragility before the ocean. Gerry grew by conversing with fear instead of fleeing from it. He practiced meditation to steady his heart, breath control to negotiate with the darkness, and smiling even when his back still ached from slams into the ocean floor. The times he nearly drowned at Pipeline left not just scars on his skin, but the roar of waves entrenched in his ears. That roar followed him to the screen, transforming Subotai into an archer whose hands did not tremble, because he had already stared into the brink between life and death. Now 77 years old, Gerry Lopez continues to live as a guardian of the waves, shaping surfboards in Bend, Oregon, teaching a philosophy of breathing, standing, then riding, and speaking out for the oceans that are under threat. Sven Ola Thorson as Thorgrim. Sven Ola Thorson played Thorgrim in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, the giant hammer-wielding guard who stood beside Thulsa Doom when he was 38 years old. Every blow he struck seemed to nail fate into stone, and his towering figure created a threatening atmosphere that drenched Conan's journey in steel and destiny. Sven Ola Thorson was born on September 24, 1944, in Copenhagen, Denmark, and his path to the screen was carved by one recurring theme: physical injury. The strong man who came out of weightlifting platforms and martial arts mats carried knees that screeched with every bandage wrap, wrists that went numb after heavy training, and a back that had snapped rhythm more than once from lifting beyond its limit. He learned to swallow pain deep into his gut, using muscles as armor to endure nights of shivering joints. That same theme followed him even when the studio lights came on. He walked into fight scenes with knees taped tight, soaked his legs in ice water between retakes, and lived with the fear that one sudden collapse would steal both his role and his career. In 1995, the operating table greeted him with the sting of disinfectant. A knee surgery ended in silence, but left scars that became lessons about the price of every hammer swing on screen. By 2025, Sven Ola Thorson is 81 years old, living more calmly and appearing selectively, occasionally serving as a martial arts consultant and fitness trainer for action projects. His net worth is estimated at around $5 million, reflecting a life spent selling violence on screen and discipline off it. Today, the silver screen warrior devotes his time to musculoskeletal recovery, moderate training, and telling the younger generation that glory only stands firm when legs, even after surgery, still keep moving forward. Nadiuska, as Conan's mother. At 30 years old, Nadiuska played Conan's mother in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, appearing briefly in the opening sequence but leaving a mark of tragedy across the entire story. The woman clutching her child amid fire and steel, eyes frozen before destiny, created a haunting image. A mother's love forced to watch violence rip apart her home. Nadiuska was born on January 19, 1952, in Schierling, Germany, to an Eastern European family scarred by post-war displacement. The tall, slender young woman left home in search of opportunity in Spain at a very young age, and from that point onward, one theme clung to her: the temptations of the night. She learned Spanish in cramped boarding rooms, posed for photos to pay the rent, and stepped onto film sets with an empty stomach and drinks offered as if they were tickets of entry. Every smile before the camera was another time she swallowed the humiliation of exile. She grew up amid scorching lights and promises sweet as traps. She believed a little alcohol might soften loneliness, A cigarette might calm her pounding heart before a scene, and tomorrow might look different if tonight passed in a haze. That temporary painkiller gradually replaced sleep, then replaced meals, leaving cracks across a face that had been born to dazzle. By the time the title of star arrived, the shadow of addiction was already standing behind her. By 2025, Nadiuska is 73 years old, living quietly in a psychiatric care facility in Ciempozuelos, Madrid, after long battles with alcoholism, drug use, and a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Her net worth is estimated at about $500,000 after bankruptcy. The image that makes people ache is not the red carpet, but the moment in the film when a mother clutches her son and watches her village burn. Jorge Sans as young Conan. When Jorge Sans was just 13 years old, he played young Conan in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, a boyish face, gripping destiny with dark, burning eyes. The moment the child stood amid white snow and blazing steel opened the tragic path of the hero, while also planting the seeds of a youth that would taste both the glow of fame and the solitude behind the camera. Jorge Sans was born on August 26, 1969, in Madrid, Spain, and his path of growing up in front of the camera chose one singular trial: vice. The flashes of cameras, party invitations, and Madrid's sleepless nights dragged the rising teen idol into a spiral of excess. The pressure to grow up too quickly pushed Jorge toward white powder as a false break. Dawn after dawn became trembling mornings, every audition a moment to hide bloodshot eyes. He plunged downhill in the 1990s as cocaine addiction turned schedules into lists of cancellations, promising roles into calls that never came back. Money vanished through long nights, while fame withered like posters outside a cinema, washed away by rain. He tried many times to quit, many times swore to himself he would stand again, but the powder knew how to wait at the alley's end. Just one breath, and every oath slipped off his tongue. By 2025, Jorge Sans is 56 years old and continues to live with his craft as someone returned from the edge, acting in select Spanish films, writing scripts after nightfall, and appearing on stage with breaths measured on beat. With a net worth estimated at $3 million, he now has enough calm to face his past directly, while the present lies neat as a corrected script: an old wooden desk, a cold cup of coffee, and a new page of dialogue. Luis Barboo as Red Hair. At 47 years old, Luis Barboo played Red Hair in Conan the Barbarian, 1982, the grim henchman who followed violence in silence. Every step he took echoed like boots crushing gravel, every sword sweep tightening fate around Conan, leaving behind a supporting figure as haunting as the leaders themselves. Luis Barboo was born on March 20th, 1935, in Vigo, Spain, and before reaching the spotlight, his path had already been broken by one defining blow: a back injury. A workplace accident in 1960 slammed him against concrete, leaving a searing pain running down his spine like a saw blade. The man who walked from construction sites into audition rooms had to learn how to stand tall before the camera, then quietly hunch over backstage, swallowing both saliva and groans. He carried that same burden onto film sets like an invisible cross. He wrapped bandages around his waist, stretched vertebrae between takes, and hid pain behind the cold face of soldiers, pirates, and henchmen. Every fall from a horse in fight scenes sent tremors through his back as if it might shatter. Every time he rose again, he used willpower instead of medicine, determined not to let pain steal his livelihood. On September 30th, 2001, Luis Barboo passed away in Madrid at 66 years old. His estimated net worth of about $1 million closed a life that climbed from the dust of construction sites to the dust of film sets. The image left behind was deep red hair under fading lights, a prop sword leaning on a wall, and a straight back held until the end. Which moment struck your heart the most? The wizard's haunting words, Valeria's fierce gaze, or King Osric's heavy crown? Whose story would you like us to explore next? Leave the name of the actor you want us to honor in the comments, share this video with fellow Hyboria fans, and hit follow with the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of beloved Conan the Barbarian actors who have tragically passed away.